All right, here's what I'm going to be using. This is just an experiment. So I'm using some pretty cheap paper. This is only construction paper, but I have a couple of methods for getting water in there. I have a spray bottle and just a dip can, and then just a few synthetic brushes. I'm going to start with, actually, a clean brush, my largest one. I'm dipping it in to water, and I'm going to start, even though I'm working on a red surface, I'm going to see what happens. I might need to repaint the entire background if my reds are different. I'm going to be trying to create an image of a red pepper. As you saw, that was sort of my theme for this. Nothing in nature is truly monochromatic, but I think that we can render a number of things that way. All right, I'm going to go ahead and get into this with some of my lighter tints right now. Once again, I'll try to say it as much as I can. I add white to a color and I get a tint. Notice that with the tempera, I'm going right onto wet paint, and so it mixes right on there. In this case, you may have seen I just dipped directly into this white. If I come onto this, notice that when I start allowing my brush to dance across this, that it's really quite bright, which is something I'll end up using. As I work this in, it's just going to, sometimes we let the paint be the paint. It's going to do what it's going to do. Since it blends in here, it's one of the things that I like and both hate about this medium. Tempera paint is good. It's sort of like a kid's paint or a play paint. It's good for training because it's cheap. I like its workability because it doesn't dry right away. But that's also the issue. It never becomes waterproof. And so we're always going to have these issues with it smearing. So even if I were to let this dry for a week, it is still going to be have a tendency to smear. I may dip my brush into a little bit of water occasionally just to re-wet this stuff. So once again, that's one of the good things about it, is that when it's on the palette and it dries up with acrylic, you just have to get more paint if it dries on the palette. But with this stuff, you can just wet it and get going again. I am going to use this a little bit on the pepper itself. Notice that I'm avoiding the tints. I'm putting this color down, this shade, but I'm not touching the tint. Now, one thing I can do, I can start with my darkest areas. For instance, right here. I lay down a good dark shade. Now, if I need to, I can clean it off on this, take a little bit off onto another surface, and then just as I hit this, it will blend a little bit. I can also go, why don't I grab a fresh brush? I'm going to use this one that has a little bit of the pure color on it, and I'm just going to start hitting that, and that's going to create a nice blend. Once again, I am not mixing my shades with my tints. If I decide that I need to move this tint a little bit, if I'm using too much there, I'll go over it with a pure color, paint it out essentially. I may potentially be able to get in here and scrape some off later if I need to. I'm going to create a little drop shadow here. I'm starting with a little bit of pure color just to create a slick surface. So sometimes with paint we put a little bit down just to have a slick surface. So when I get in there with my shade, it will slide around real nice. All right, I'm going to get a little bit more extreme with this. I'm going to get in there with a pure black. I'm laying this black down directly next to the object. With drop shadows, normally the shadow is darkest, closest to the object that is casting the shadow. So as I put this down, now I'm going to, you know what, I'm going to start putting some up here. I don't know if you noticed on my other ones, but I wanted to create almost a vignette by laying allowing everything to be darker towards the edge. But at the same time, I'm cleaning my brush. Now I'm going to get back in here with some pure color, and I can soften this edge. So I'm going over these edges. So now notice that I'm creating a softer transition. With most things, most times we're working in this manner, or working in any manner, we want to balance. Sometimes we'll choose a very hard edge. Notice that right on this side, I have a very hard edge, a very quick transition from dark to light, a very rapid transition from color to color. On this side, I've softened it out, and so it blends. We call that a soft edge. And then up here where I'm going away, I am going to get into a little bit of that pure color again, and let's see if we can create a soft transition out here. Yeah. So in this way, it creates a feeling that this is farther, like the surface is farther away from this thing. We get a feeling that it's coming off of the surface. Oh, hope you can understand what I'm trying to say. And then I'm going to do the same thing down here. I'm going to try to take some of this, bring it out to here, and then soften that. Sweet. I'm going to create a nice edge down here. And once again, I am not averse to using a little bit of water in this. Sometimes the water really helps this stuff move. And I'm not using, that doesn't mean I'm thinning it like a watercolor. I might just get in here, put a little bit of water down there, and now where I can apply a little bit of water, you'll notice that this stuff will move much more rapidly. My brush is carrying a little bit of black, and so it tends to dirty this area right in between. So I might go back to my pure brush and get in here and finish this up. That one I didn't necessarily put water on it, but I don't think I needed to because there was already plenty of moisture down on the surface. I can soften this a little bit more. Oh yeah. A little bit of water, clean it off on here. Now notice I am not cramming the brush down and destroying the bristles. When I clean this, I normally put in a little bit of water, and then I drag it across the surface like this. I'm very careful to take good care of my brushes. What? I'm going to get into my tint, because I notice that I want to put a lighter background up above the surface here. Once again, I want to go from a hard edge right here along where the edge of my pepper is, and then I'll probably try to soften that out also. So create a gradation or a blend from a very light tint to a middle toned tint. Remember how I suggested that we'll never mix our tints with our shades. A tint is my color plus white. Beautiful. Oh, come on. There, that's kind of soft. I can always add a little bit more. But the point I'm trying to arrive at is that I'm going to go into a pure color here to transition from my tint to my shade. And then I can soften them both. At first I'm going to try to soften this color into my tint. And notice that I'm working with a fairly dry brush. As my color comes off the brush and I don't have a lot of stuff, then I can start sort of hatch stroking here and see how that, using a drier brush, will cause this to soften. I'm going to do the same thing up here. I start with a loaded brush. It's wet. And then as it dries out, I start to hatch up to that. You know what? I'm going to use the brush that I had reserved for my shades, and I'm going to work my shades back down to that, because if I want a softer transition, that will be important. And you know, sometimes I just need to get in there and go back and forth, which is kind of my style. Also, you might notice my style is something that some people might call painterly, and what that means is, when I'm showing you how to blend here, I don't mind having brush strokes. I will be able to get in and restate these. I'm going to work them a little tiny bit. I don't know if that's right. Now, especially when I decide to get into some detail, notice that I don't immediately go to a smaller brush. I use a little bit more water. I roll the brush to hopefully get a smaller tip. Now, if I'm a little bit more sensitive, I can get a much smaller detail there and pull it across. Basically, what I'm saying is this. I can use my brush to get a small detail or a much broader detail. And that's simply by the way that I use my brush. I could always go with a smaller brush, but I think that it's a good challenge to stay with as few brushes as possible. Another thing that does for us is it gives our artwork unity. When I'm using a single brush, and of course when we're working with a monochromatic color scheme, we normally have pretty good unity because all of the colors are related to one another. That is, every color on here has a little bit of red in there. When I use a single brush, even if I'm using a whole bunch of different colors, each one of those colors will sort of start to combine in the others. And, oh, for Pete's sake. And that gives a piece unity also, because unity in a painting, especially color unity, is caused by limiting that palette. Sometimes we don't want to use every color in the crayon box. We want to limit ourselves so that each color goes with the one next to it, or goes with some colors around there. I sometimes call that color chords. They're related in some way. Oh, geez Louise. Now notice I did go to a smaller brush, because I'm a hypocrite, and as soon as I give you a rule, then I'm going to break it. And so I'm going to, I should try to break that up or it's going to look like an outline. There's such a variety of tints in here. I think that I can hardly go wrong unless I don't give it that variety. So I am getting in here and just sort of playing around. Also, I'm allowing these colors to break up a little bit. They don't all have to go together and attach, but often in a composition, especially like this, we have something we can call compositional paths. The compositional path is something, highlights or shadows usually, that will lead our eye through a composition. In this case, I have created, well, nature has created for me this row of highlights which follows up this direction. I'm creating, it runs right into this stem. The stem is going to come off of the page, perhaps. I don't know if that's the best choice for this composition, but it is what it is. Now, obviously, if I was into realism, I would be creating something, a green stem, greens and yellow greens, and naturally on this pepper also there would be, some oranges and a whole variety of colors. I'm even seeing magentas, violets, or lavenders when I start to look at it very closely. So, in this process, we're limiting ourselves. It is, it's a really nice color scheme. Monochromatic is a very nice color scheme because, once again, it's an easy way to achieve unity in a painting, a little bit of variety. Instead of just being a black and white painting, now we're working with a little bit of color. I'm going to go to a pure color again, because I want to have a very slight highlight over here. And as I've said over and over, I do not want to mix a shade with a tint. In the real world, when I'm out painting, anything goes. But for this particular project, come on. Oh, I don't like that. For this particular project, we're going to attempt to maintain some rules so that we can learn about this. Now, I am attempting to create a background or an environment. And one thing I'm trying to do, like I did here, I wanted to have a lighter area right next to this. For one thing, it's creating a very nice contrast, bringing this off the page, because now we can tell that there's something that is not the same color behind it. I'm going to try blending this a little bit just with water. I just wet my brush. And now I'm working that out. So you can see that even with just water, it blends. I'm going to wipe my brush a little bit, clean a little, a couple of times. And now, not too much water, damp, but not soaking wet. I'm going to come in here and, I don't know if you can see it, I'm sort of doing X strokes, but I can also do broad strokes coming across. So what I'm trying to do is create a contrast between the object and the background. And where I'm running into a little bit of trouble, and I'm struggling, is right down here. Because once again, I want it to be lighter, but you notice how quickly it becomes darker. I want to honor this drop shadow. I shouldn't take too long on this. I need to move on. Too late, huh? So I attempted to create this reflected light down here. So what I noticed on my original, or on the resource that I'm using, there is a reflected light, which is what this, I was hoping that would be. The light bounces off a light surface and it comes back onto this. It's a great effect that aids us because it causes much greater contrast between the shaded drop shadow and then there's this reflected light onto the surface. But I just don't feel, I'm just not feeling it. I don't like it. I think maybe I need to be more subtle. I'm going to attempt to use a value that isn't quite that light. I'm still going to use a tint, but not quite as light, I say, as I get in there and do exactly what I just said I wasn't going to do. By the way, I am, right now I'm choking up very far on this brush. I'm doing lots of detail, and so I have a tendency to choke up on it. Oh, I hate this. Oh, drive me crazy. I'm going to try to hit it with a pure color. See if I can save this. Right here, it just got away from me. And there is actually a darker shadow right next to that reflected light, which was one of the reasons that this is killing me. Well, maybe that's what I do. I just keep it a little bit more subtle. I'm going to see if I can get in there with a little bit of a value shift. I don't like that. Use the wrong brush. Try that again. So notice that I use so little black. Once again, I'm not lying to you, it's a very powerful color. You have to be so careful with it. Okay. Now this, I think, if I can soften it, I think I'm going to be okay. So I'm going to wash a lot of that out, come back to a lot of the pure color. I'm going to try to do as few strokes as possible. Boom. Now I'll just get in here and, oops, pump up the volume a little bit by hitting with some pure white. I'm going to thin that white pretty good. Of course, my water was dirty, and so it is contaminating it a bit. But I want to be able to have some just pure areas, because that will really pump up the volume here. It'll bring it this farther off the page. You know, I am going to do something I might regret here. I'm going to try to use I thought that I might be able to make this stem a middle tone if I could put a really bright color right next to it. And once again, getting in there with a little bit of water and attempting to soften this out. Oh, I'm going to have to use that pure color. Ooh, too crazy. Well, I think that I need a little bit of this white on this side now. Oh boy. So sometimes we might do these kind of arbitrary shapes in the background. You know, if the direction of one thing is going that direction, sometimes we might get in there and just allow another shape to go contrary to that. The shape doesn't necessarily have a meaning, but it has a purpose. Its purpose is to help this composition. I'm going to call it done.